Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for Wake Up with Women's Council of Realtors North Central. To talk about an important topic that affects millions of women worldwide, menopause. I am your host, Fariha Chogle, and I would like to begin by thanking our sponsors for their support to our network. Tough Home Inspections, Goosehead Insurance, and Vanguard Kensington Title and 1031 Exchange. Without them, none of this would be possible. Audiences, please feel free to use the chat to post any comments or questions, and we will address them as we go. And the questions at the end of the session, we like a live commenting group. So, just to give you a little bit of an introduction, menopause, like puberty and childbirth, is a physiological stage of reproductive health. However, negative stereotypes, lack of positive representation, and confusion about where to access support makes this a complex issue for women today, especially within the workspace. Many people are familiar with the physical aspects of menopause, such as hot flashes and night sweats. Menopause is actually a much more complex and multifaceted experience that can also impact a woman's psychological, spiritual well being, and emotional well being. In today's talk, we will explore what menopause is, why it happens, and how women can navigate this transitional journey with grace and ease. We will also discuss the key role that support system can play in helping women through this time of change and resources for support, of course. So let's start and learn more about menopause together. Allow me to introduce our speaker for today, Nathalie Bonafé, PhD. She is a biochemist and molecular biologist with 25 years of biomedical research experience, who now advocates for women's health from midlife on. In her private practice, she educates and coaches women through perimenopause, menopause, and beyond. Natalie is also an experienced end of life educator and advocate, also known as end of life doula. Thank you, Natalie, for joining us today. We are so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much, Fahira.
Yes.
We're starting very strong. We're talking about taboos like menopause and death. Good morning, everyone.
So,
Things that we cannot escape, like taxes.
so Natalie, tell me, why are you so passionate about menopause? I mean, we've been through it for thousands of years. So why are we talking about it now?
Well, this is very interesting. I've always been, excited to be here anyway. So I've always been fascinated by biology, and particularly what happened at the molecular level, at the microscopic level. This is, just as a teenager, very much as an introvert, that was really my passion and how things worked. I spent my first, 25 years of my professional life, scientific life, in the laboratory, working hands-on, trying to understand how things were working in various organs in the human body, and also what happens when things go wrong. So, slowly, and as I evolved in my career, I moved it toward studying, cancer research and also infectious disease research, and looking to develop, like every young scientist, you want to save the world, and you want to develop new therapeutics to solve, biomedical problems. But in my 40s, and I want to emphasize the 40s, obviously, I just became, I had done that with a lot of passion, but I became more and more interested in the bigger picture, who are we as humans? You were talking earlier about our resources, water, air, as the Canadian fires, we all share those resources. So who are we as human beings in our respective communities? our interest, how do we manage our health from a philosophical perspective? So yes, I'm a PhD, so I like, philosophy, although it's also biology and health. It's really that angle that fascinated me, and I come to you from that angle. And so basically, what is the purpose of life, and what does it mean to lead a meaningful life in the 21st century? It's a very, kind of hard, heavy questions for a Friday morning, but nevertheless, really engaging, and I hope we can continue the conversation at the end together. So of course, I said I was in my 40s, and I think I was really retrospectively, because it's I'm mid-50s now. I was going through a midlife crisis, and my own questionings and own purpose in the world. Where am I coming from? Where am I going? What sort of legacy do I want to leave? And I think that's important. As women, we don't necessarily talk about lipstick and and haircut. We also talk about what are we here for, and what legacy do I want to leave behind. So you may think, my God, Nathalie, this is so morbid, but that path has not been morbid at all. It felt necessary. And I'm talking about this today, this menopause, why it's more than just a physical problem, is we need to be able to process what happens to our bodies at this time. So it's something that is necessary. So that's when that process may have, sound morbid, but that's when I decided to become an end-of-life doula, and to learn to serve people, to understand and to serve people approaching the end of their life. So it's part of my philosophical path. But in doing that work, I learned so much. And I found personally a lot of clarity and peace of mind. And that was a life-changing experience that
You wanted to share with
I'm
everyone.
becoming vocal about.
Right, absolutely. So you just mentioned about our lives in the 21st century. So what do we need to know about menopause, and why does it matter in the 21st century?
Sure. Did you? Yes. So we are. So right now we are about 50 million women in menopause, and I will define the menopause, in the next slide. In the slide. So menopause is during menopause, and post-menopause. So we're 50, we are 50 million women. So Generation X, millennials are just getting into that crowd, and we are all trying to live our lives, to make a decent living. We are also, for most of us, we are caregivers, for our children or aging parents. And I found that there was very, very little support in that group. And people are terrified of change. So we have very little support once we reach adulthood. So menopause, do I have my first slide? I think I'm going to start sharing.
Sure, absolutely.
That's okay?
Yes, please go ahead.
Can you see? Yeah.
Yes, we can.
So menopause remains one of the most, the last taboos to debunk. It's often, made fun of. I remember being in the office, or and men talking about their wives going through menopause. That was not fun. I was younger at that time and not as vocal about it, of course. It's been dismissed, it's been misdiagnosed for a long time. It's still misdiagnosed, and often as a mental health condition. And some of the symptoms can take many of us to the psychiatrist or the couple counselor, or even the hospital. But I believe that if we learn a little bit about female biology and become more self-aware, we can make this transition a lot easier on our body, but also our families. I was talking about purpose and meaning of life, our families, our lives, our finances, because we're women in the workplace or in the workforce, and also save us a lot of aggravation. And it can allow us to live the second half of our lives a lot more meaningfully and easily. So what do we need to know? I think the first thing that I like to bring up is the awareness, because in any case, awareness of a specific situation can absolutely change the collective clarity. We have made so much progress in terms of diversity and inclusion, in the past, and also same-sex, LGBTQ. This is when the Me Too movement. We've made a lot of progress, not enough, but we started. But the menopause awareness can really change our quality of life, professional lives, personal relationships, disease prevention, aging well, self-acceptance, and determination. The second thing I like to share is that menopause is really a 19th century term. We as people, right, on this planet, and we were quite privileged, in the Western world. In 1990, the most, the life expectancy was at best 50 years old. So, and we've always had menopause, between, 40 and 50. So by the time we reach menopause, not only did we stop having children, but we also died. So, keep that in mind, that this is fairly, awareness comes from, more exposure. A few numbers that are very, that speak a lot. As I said, with 50 million women currently in menopause in the United States, 6,000 enter menopause every day, 2 million a year. You were talking about millions of women worldwide in menopause. Well, in a couple of years, it's estimated that the number of postmenopausal, you understand what happened, why I'm saying that, women is expected to rise to 1.1 billion worldwide in 2025. So this is huge. And other numbers, this is an average age for women to reach menopause is 51. It could be as early as the 30s, it could be up to the 60s, but that would be the average. 5% of those women, would go into menopause very early, like in their 30s and 40s. And perimenopause, I'm going to get through that, can last, almost a decade. So let me get you to, and you can keep the slides and read more about the numbers here. Menopause women are the fastest growing demographic in the workplace, and 80% will experience symptoms. That's our statistics. And despite the numbers, 1.1 billion, we're still very important. We're still very embarrassed to bring up the subject. And what makes me really upset, and what I'm trying to change, is like 73% so far, 73% of women do not address their menopause symptoms. So let's, live with it. My mother went through it, my grandmother went through it, type of mentalities, except that we're in the 21st century and life is very stressful. So, and stress has a major influence on how we go through it. The fourth thing that I want that we really need to know is that the the stages of menopause. So we go, from puberty, where our hormones, go up, and on your left are the estrogen levels, and then it kind of stable, during our reproductive years, and then we start for natural menopause. It starts, kind of going down and oscillate, and then you have what we call the postmenopause. So menopause is the point of time when a woman's ovaries have ceased to function. I'm not going to go into too much of the biology, and the production of estrogen and progesterone dramatically drops. We're no longer fertile. Fine, this is important. The perimenopause is that period before menopause, and that is a phase that can last up to a decade. And the hormones are totally unpredictable and uneven, and that's when we start having symptoms. It can, so then there is postmenopause, and one point that I like to make is that once we reach menopause, it lasts until we die. So this is not something we just go through and, get over with. And the reason why I'm saying that is that we're working with women who are a lot older, in 70s, in their 80s. I can tell you that there are a lot of problems that are just affecting the quality of life, and could be Alzheimer's, could be UTIs, it could be broken bones, it could be heart problems. So this is the management of menopause is not just something that we take care for, the time to help with the symptoms, but we want to think in terms of long-term investment in our lives and in our lives, right? Did you want to? What do we have?
So, Natalie, before we move
Yes.
forward, can I ask you a question? You said that, perimenopause can last up to a decade, right? How do we know, and there's misdiagnosis as well. So how do we know we are in perimenopause, and what can we experience post-menopause?
Yes. So I think the easiest, first of all, in the previous slide, you noticed I removed the age. This is very important because in the mind of a lot of physicians that have not necessarily been trained in menopause, that is another subject. Women who start experiencing hot flashes, at 51, it's kind of like, oh yeah, you are experiencing menopause. Here's what you can do or not do, right? But so it's almost like, oh, I wake up, I have my first hot flash, and I feel like, oh, that must be menopause. But it's a lot more subtle than that. And personally, I never had hot flashes for reasons that I could also explain. But when a woman in their 30s or anyone born with a uterus, right? You understand what I mean. In her 30s or 40s is going to have a hot flash, and she's going to see a doctor, and they're going to say, oh, you're not there yet, because they think that menopause, or there is this belief that I'm not there yet because I'm not in my 50s. So that could be totally dismissed. The thing is, what's important in terms of symptoms, you need to understand that our hormones that are being depleted after our ovaries stop functioning. And it could be natural menopause, where it happens naturally. It could also be after surgery and some genetic conditions as well. So that's when it can happen a lot earlier too. Or after cancer therapy, where the chemotherapy has killed our ovaries. So we have those hormones, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, are actually everywhere in our body. Not so they are produced, most of them are produced by our ovaries. So when they stop working, they stop producing. But the normal role of those hormones is not just to regulate our reproductive system, but estrogen in particular and progesterone have receptors in the brain and controls, our memory, our mental health, our libido. We have receptors on muscles, on breast, in the liver, in the heart, in our bones. And I'm emphasizing here the brain because the brain is really the powerhouse. This is what influences what we decide to do. So when we don't have estrogen anymore, all the areas that are rich, are not going to function very well. It's generally temporary when it comes to the brain because the brain adapts. But we start, I think I have, so areas like memory, cognition, attention, mental health, the production of serotonin, temperature regulation, is all in the brain. This is why we have symptoms. Okay, so but it's not our imagination. It's been actually shown that in here at the bottom, you see the difference in energy in the brain, energy and metabolism. A woman in pre-menopause, right, will have, a lot of, red spots where, there is a lot of metabolism happening in the brain, and it changes dramatically after menopause. So that somehow the brain adapts, but this is not something we are imagining. It is real that. So the problem is, when we talk about things that happen in the brain, what do? We go see a psychologist, a psychiatrist, and so we do not necessarily know that they are menopause symptoms. So that's why, and it's in this transition. So the periods, we know those symptoms are kind of real, right? It starts skipping, it starts being heavier or lighter. We start having, worsening of the PMS. What you're going to hear a lot in the next years are vasomotor symptoms, VMS. So they include, those are the typically or common symptoms that we hear: hot and cold flashes, night sweats, heart palpitation, changes in blood pressure. Okay, those are and they could happen a lot earlier, but pay attention to that. They usually all go together if you have periods in general, if you're not on birth control pill. There is also a sexual dysfunction that have to do with the organs themselves and with the slowing down in the brain, and vaginal dryness. And we don't necessarily talk about, but those are symptoms, and this is very important too. Urinary urgency are generally, when I first had some problems, I was told, oh no, this is not related to menopause, but you would talk to every woman who has had a child or who is aging, and there's going to be some problems. Difficulty sleeping, emotional changes, all of this are just something to pay attention to. And some women are very based on, trauma history, family history, can have racing hearts, headaches, joint and muscle aches, changing in libido. I think I mentioned it before, weight gain, hair thinning, cognitive disturbances, and not two women are going to have the same symptoms. So it's really challenging. What you might have is different from what I have. And there is no perfect example. And that's why we're being dismissed. So it's very complex. So if you go for some symptoms management, you want, I mean, we're getting toward the end, so I want you to
You
think
can go
about
on.
Mhm. I want
You
you
can
to
go
think
on.
about two things about symptom management. Okay, once you start, you want that awareness, you want to know that your entire body is going to be affected by that transition. Not just your periods, not just the hot flashes. And even when you think of hot flashes, and your heart, think about, the blood vessels, and think about the receptors in the brain that actually regulate the whole thing. They're going to give you, there are two things to keep in mind. If you go to a doctor, they're going to look at you and they're going to ask you, what sort of symptoms do you have? Okay. Unless you have the VMS symptoms, the vasomotor symptoms that are the most typical, but not the only ones, or vaginal dysfunction, you have options, or you're going to be offered two things based on your general health, your history of cancer in the family, in yourself. Hormone therapies are prescribed almost exclusively, if you go to the typical physician, for those VMS and vaginal sexual dysfunctions. And you really want, when you're offered hormone therapy, there's a lot out there, we could talk for a long time. Now the recommendations are very different from what they were 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, and certainly 20 or 30 years ago. We now have, as a biochemist, we now have the hormones that are identical to the ones we are producing. Okay. They call them bioidentical. There is a little bit of discussions around this, but when you hear about estradiol and progesterone, or DHEA and testosterone, those are the hormones we make ourselves. So you can be offered that sort of therapy, and we could maybe have some questions afterwards. And then you have, for women who cannot, people who cannot have hormones, there are now new or older non-hormonal therapies for those symptoms, including cognitive behavior therapy, hypnosis, and also SSRI, which are generally prescribed for anxiety and depression. But there are, and there is this very new drug that came out that treats specifically that area in the brain that I mentioned, where the hot flashes, the thermal regulation happens. And it's fascinating. It's called Visoline, and it was approved by the FDA 2 weeks ago. So scientifically speaking, they are a lot more targeted, and it's going to be a lot better. But overall, what I like to bring is, like, you're going to be able to get management of some symptoms, but you also, and which is fine, you also want to think in terms of general health because of all the receptors in the body. For those, generally, the hormone therapy has been proven to be the most effective for both this management and for bone, heart health. But you want to, and especially for preventing chronic diseases, but you want to think about, hormonal or non-hormonal, which is just fine, and changes in lifestyle, like your diet, your exercise routine, your stress management. I got rid of a few toxic people in my life too, all, and some of the supplements, and support groups. Not two women are going to have the same, you cannot compare yourself. And that's where I come personally, as offering individualized empowerment and support and help in mindset based on your own beliefs. What is it that you want for yourself? And we're closing the circle from when I started, saying, where do you want to go? What do you want to do with the other half of your life? And this is where the empowerment is so important. The support really makes a difference from my experience working with clients.
True. Natalie, we're running a little short on time. Could we
I'm
go to
done. I'm
all
done.
right, great.
We do have a
Awesome.
couple of questions for you, though,
Yes.
Natalie.
Let's try. Yes.
One of them were, are there blood tests doctors can do to test your estrogen hormone?
So if you ask a doctor who, I am not a physician, so I'm going to answer as a scientist.
Mhm.
The best way to test your hormones, because sometimes women do not have cycles anymore. So generally, a doctor who would know what they're talking about is going to say, first, if you're starting to feel fatigue and to not very well, they're going to test your thyroid. That's the first thing. They want to make sure that your thyroid, your thyroid hormones are stable. This is when in doubt. So because a lot of the symptoms from menopause, perimenopause look like thyroid problems. So keep that in mind. And the second thing is you're going to look at not necessarily estrogen and progesterone levels, although you can if things get complicated, but the hormones that are being the FSH. The FSH is this hormone that is produced and is involved with estrogen and progesterone in the regulation with the brain. So as the estrogen and testosterone and progesterone decrease, this FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, increases dramatically. And this is a very solid test. While estrogen and progesterone, as you can see, fluctuates a lot in perimenopause. So it's really hard to get. Once you get to the postmenopause, your estrogens are going to be flat down. But in perimenopause, it's hard. So go with FSH.
Okay. That's good to
Sorry.
know. Are
Yes.
there any more questions, Sharon?
Yeah, the other question was, I just started skipping my periods and my main symptoms is heart palpitations. Is
Yeah.
that normal?
Yes. Well, it's normal. You want to be very careful. It might be running in your family. Okay. So as I had it in the list of symptoms, it's not just hot flashes. It's a very wide range of symptoms, from anxiety to sexual dysfunction. So heart palpitation are part of the things that
Menopause
happen to you.
symptoms.
So especially go see a provider. And I gave you, Farhira, some information about the North American Menopause Society, and you can find providers who actually know what they're talking about. So if you could share that.
Absolutely. We'll share that
Afterwards.
right. We'll share that in our email once we're done with the session. We will
Yes.
be sending out the video and the resources. And if Natalie, if you could share the slides with us as well, we could add that to the email as well. Thank you so much,
Do that.
Natalie, for
Yes, I
this.
will do that. And again, when in doubt, I generally work before going to the doctor, so you don't have to do it all alone. And I can save you a lot of time. And it
Thank
doesn't
you.
break the bank.
It is interesting because when we are experiencing all these other differences like UTIs or other dysfunctions in our body, we're associating it to different diseases, but not connecting it back to menopause, which is very, very interesting. Thank you so much for this eye-opening and educational experience, Natalie.
Sorry, I went
Be-
over. Bye. Have a great day.
we still have some time. So
This is
before ending today's
what
session,
patch of estrogen or estradiol looks like. This is in
great.
the book, but I'll send you some information too.
Thank
Anyway.
you. So before ending today's session, I would like to ask our sponsors to say a few words. I see Jaina is with us on the call today. Jaina, would you please take the stage for like 2 minutes and tell us what you do and a little bit about your company?
Hey, Faria. Good morning. And that
Good
was
morning.
super interesting. And I'm not even going to talk about what I do. I write insurance, but that was fascinating to me because my symptoms are all relatively new. And it was amazing. I had it appears to be my very last period on my 50th birthday, the morning
Oh,
of
wow.
it. So it's a very easy date to remember. But I'm
Yeah.
pretty vocal, I'm pretty loud, and I'm pretty vocal, and I'm not shy. And I have found myself just saying in public, like, I got to take a break. I'm having a really wicked hot flash. I can't talk right now because
Wow.
I'm just so tired of having to, like, find my way through that discomfort when I'm clearly sweating and uncomfortable. So I have found that I'm just starting to say it, and it makes men very uncomfortable, and I just don't care.
More power to you, Gina. More power to you, Gina. Well
1.1
done.
billion women in the world. 1.1 billion.
It's a huge number, and it is so interesting that we just cover it up and not talk about it, and somehow it's just going to go away. It's not going to go away. It's here to stay, and it's something that every woman is going to experience if she lives long enough to experience it. So it's interesting that we still not open about it, but
And
talking
young
about it
women
is the
going through
beginning.
menopause, it's even worse. The stigma that there is, for women who are in their 30s or in 40s going through medical menopause, among other things, are absolutely dismissed. Forget
True.
about women of color. Okay, so you don't want to get me started here. So this is a very interesting thing. I'm so glad you're talking about it, Gina.
Thank you. Thank you, Jaina. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much for your support. I hope you enjoyed today's wake up, and you will join us again July 14th for yet another session. If you are not a member, I see Karen raising her hand. Karen, do you have a question? Is it okay if we take it after I close out? All right. So if you are not a member, please consider joining our WCR family. Link to join is in the chat. Thanks to Sharon. We are expanding our team, and we are looking for a communication director, and we're looking for volunteers to join our events and membership committees as well. So please reach out to us if you want to get involved. It's a easy way to get involved with Women's Council. Thank you for coming. I hope you have a great weekend. Bye bye.